Raise your hand if you ever think about your nose. Like on a day-to-day basis. When you wake up, do you think about how your nose looks? When you walk down the street, do you think about how your nose looks? Raise your hand if you do. Only a few of you. I didn't expect that many hands to go up. Fun fact, when I was younger, we used to flare up our nostrils when we walked down the streets so that we could look like other tribes, because my nose was considered criminal. I'm from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Raise your hand if you know where that is. I'm happy to see that most of you do. If you don't, it's smack in the middle of Africa. It's a really, really big country, rich in resources, in culture, and that's where I was born. But for many generations, my people were not considered Congolese. And to explain why that is, I'll have to go back in history. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of the 1994 Rwandan genocide. It's good to see that most of you have. So in 1994, the horrific genocide that killed millions of Tutsis happened. And after that, the same rebel groups that perpetuated the horrific act fled to neighboring countries. They fled to Congo, Tanzania, Burundi, and even Kenya. They fled to South Kivu, which is the closest part of Congo to Rwanda. After that, we had always been called Rwandan by people who thought that because my tribe had kept their traditions and culture from Rwanda, that we didn't somehow belong, even though we lived there for over 300 years. In school, we were always teased for looking Tutsi. Tutsi is just the name of a group of people. We don't all look the same, but some of us just have straighter noses, longer faces, bigger foreheads. And because of that, some people thought we didn't belong on this earth. Growing up, for me, conflict was a part of life, but it wasn't all of my life. I still had a very wonderful, beautiful childhood. I had parents who loved me, who nurtured my dreams. When I was younger, my dad used to tell me that I would one day grow up to be president of Congo, and I believed him. See, many people think that because it's a war zone, life stops. It doesn't. Babies are born, people get married, we celebrate birthdays and Christmases. Life continues, even when war is raging behind you. An uninterrupted school year was kind of a fantasy. We would go to school, and at any given time, war could break out, and we would have to be prepared to flee our home country. Oftentimes when this happened, we fled to Burundi, because it was just the closest place for us to flee. And what many don't know is that when people are fleeing war, not many can afford to buy a plane ticket or apply for a visa and go to places like Europe or here in the United States. Many of us can afford to get in a car and drive to the closest, safest place. We went to Burundi several times in my childhood. It was just a part of life. Oftentimes it was for a few weeks, where we would go and stay either with family friends or in a camp, and then we would head back home. This continued for my whole childhood. And in 2004, this escalated. Discrimination against my people, the Banyamulenge, continued and even got more aggressive. I was getting ready to go to school one morning, and my father came in rushing. he had that look that he always had whenever we had to leave home. And I knew to get in my room and pack my bag. It was almost kind of, something that my mom had taught me, how to pack your the most valuable clothing, ones that you can play in. I even helped my little sister pack her suitcase. We left that day thinking that we were going to come back. I didn't think it was the last time I was going to step foot in my home. This was my whole life. I had never dreamed of leaving my country, nor have I ever wanted to. I knew that my country had a lot of problems, but I had always imagined myself as part of the solution. I had always imagined myself growing up, finishing my studies, and becoming a part of Congo's saving plan. I knew from a very young age that me and my generation were going to be the ones to save Congo. Unfortunately, that's not how it ended. We ended up in a refugee camp in Burundi, and at first we thought, oh, this is normal. 2 weeks, we'll be back home. The first week went by, and as a kid, that is so exciting. It's like a week off from school, and you don't have to think about anything. Sounds fun, right? It was for the first week, and maybe for the second week, and maybe the third week. But the fourth week, it was starting to wear on me. I loved school. I was an excellent student. I loved my hometown. I loved being able to go to my big home. I loved playing with my pet monkey. No, all African kids don't have pet monkeys. It was just me, because I was a special kid. Just kidding. My uncle got it for us. He was in the military. We spent 2 months in that refugee camp with very little water, very little access to food. And I can tell you that a refugee camp is nowhere that you would want to live, or anywhere that you would ever wish anyone you care about to end up. It's not just the obvious lack of resources. It's also the lack of dignity, the lack of hope. Many people think that poverty is just the lack of money, but it's not. It's the lack of hope. It's not seeing yourself out of a situation. And after several months, I started thinking, what if we never went back home? What if this became my life? The average lifespan that a person spends in a refugee camp today is about 17 years. That could have been me. That is many people like me. Many children that fled the country with me still live in refugee camps today. I probably would still be in that refugee camp had it not been for the night of August 13th in 2004. We were sleeping just like any other night, and all of a sudden our whole world changed in a matter of hours. The refugee camp that we had been living in was under attack, and it was very unusual because refugee camps are supposed to be kind of the safe haven for refugees, literally, like it's called a refugee camp. It's supposed to be a neutral zone where people can flee war and let that play out, and civilians can enjoy safety, at least. And we thought we had at least that. We thought we were at least safe. Until my mom came rushing in that night and screaming, saying that we were under attack. She and some of the women in the camp were the only people that were sitting outside when the attack happened. When they came in to tell us, no one believed them. Some people just thought it was people who were trying to steal from nearby farms that no one was possibly targeting a refugee camp. But they were. They came in that night and slaughtered 166 people. I was with my little sister Deborah, sleeping under a mattress that my mom had left us under while gunshots flew in the air. I was just sitting there thinking, what have we done wrong? Because growing up, I thought that you were only punished when you did something wrong. So I thought that my people must have had done something wrong to deserve this. I watched as friends and family, neighbors were slaughtered in front of me. At 10 years old, I had to see things that I would never wish on anyone, let alone a 10-year-old kid. We stayed under that mattress for what seemed like forever, until we heard two men come to the door and say that they were there to rescue us. The rest of the camp was in chaos. You could hear people screaming, you could hear gunfire, you could hear the rebels who were chanting Christian songs that we used to sing in church, saying that God had given us to them, that somehow this was a part of God's greater plan for them. The two men came and said that they were there to rescue us. My mom called out from the back of the tent and said, "Are you really here to rescue us?" And I said, "Yes, come out." So my mom got up, and she had my aunt who had been shot, and her arms were literally dangling, her two sons, my cousins, and my little sister Deborah. They walked up to the front of the tent, in the doorway where the two men stood. I lingered behind, but I could see everything that was going on. For some reason, there was a voice in my head that just kept telling me not to go any further. I stood there and watched my mom interact with these two rebels. She got to the front, to the doorway, and they looked at her. They looked at each other and said, "Shoot them." Just like that, I thought my life was over. I thought I had become an orphan, and I thought that even if I survive this, I will surely die because I have no one to take care of me. Because I thought I had just seen my mother, my sister, my aunt, and my two cousins be killed. I ran back to the mattress that my mother was hiding me under. I stayed there and prayed. I prayed and said that if God could get me out of this, and if he could somehow save my mother, that I would do all of my chores, and that I would listen, and that I would be the perfect kid. And then I passed out. I don't remember what happened. I only woke up because my legs started burning. I looked around, and the tent that I was staying in was burning. The residue from the tent was dropping on my skin, and that's what woke me up. Thankfully, though, I could see my way out. I stepped outside, and as soon as I stepped outside, a young man who couldn't have been older than my brothers, probably in his 20s, had a gun to my head. I didn't know what to do. No one tells you what to do when something like that happens. These are not lessons that parents should have to teach their children. So I looked at him, and again I said, "Forgive me," because I thought that I had done something wrong. He looked around, and maybe he didn't think my life was even worth his bullet, but he kicked me to the side and I ran, and that is how I escaped. I came to find out later that my mother had survived. She had gotten shot, but because there were so many dead bodies around her, that of my baby sister Deborah, my aunt, and 2 cousins, the rebels thought that she was also dead. I can't tell you the kind of pain that I feel knowing that my mother lives with that kind of memory. The next morning, the UNHCR workers came by with plastic body bags. I was standing in front of the tent that we had been living under, which had now turned to ash, and I watched as they gathered the bones of my neighbors, my friends, and my family. My mother stood by and pointed to a skull that was laying there, and she seemed very, very convinced that it was Deborah's because she was the last person to see her. The UNHCR workers came by and picked up the bones of Deborah and threw them in a body bag filled with other bones, like she was just another disposable life. And that is why I'm here, because she's not. After that, my family became undocumented immigrants in Rwanda. We had no resources, no government help. And for the first time, I felt what real poverty was. Not only did we not have any resources, we didn't have any hope. The thing that kept us going every single day, it seemed to be lost. And in 2007, we were resettled in Rochester, New York. And I thought, finally, maybe we'll be at peace. Maybe this is it. It's America, the greatest nation of all. And let me tell you, America's PR abroad is fantastic. Amazing. We think America is just the greatest. I used to think that when we got to America, we would just get a load of cash and a new car right then and there. Because those were the dreams we were sold. And the only America I knew existed in like a 90s like flashy music video. That's what I thought you all lived like. You know, everyone had like a Bugatti if they wanted one. Like, and it didn't take long to see how wrong I was. Everywhere I looked, there was pain. There were homeless people everywhere, just like back home. People were hurting. There were serious problems that I could not even begin to understand. I found out I was Black when I moved to America. My whole life had been with people that looked like me. I'd seen white people, but I had never thought about my race. I had never thought about existing in brown skin until I moved to America. And I quickly realized that people that look like me have a very different experience in this country. It was almost like no matter where I went, I couldn't catch a break. I started hearing people say horrible things about refugees and immigrants. And the only refugees I knew and immigrants that I knew were all wonderful people who had never, ever wanted to leave their homes, who were forced out of their homes due to different circumstances. I started to see how troublesome that was. The same ideas that drove me out of my country were being manifested here in this country that was supposed to offer me all the things that I never had back home. That's why I started sharing my story. I started sharing my story in the hopes that we can see how connected we are. A lot of people think that America has like different problems than the rest of the world. Yeah, you do. But also, America is a war zone. I'm sorry to tell you, it is. If it's not to you, you need to open your eyes. You need to open your eyes to kids who live in fear of institutions that were meant to protect them. You need to open your eyes to dreamers who live in fear of being deported from the only country that they have ever known. You need to open your eyes to kids in Flint who went without clean drinking water for almost 3 years. You need to open your eyes to the struggles that are happening right here in your neighborhoods. A lot of people like going abroad to send help and to help those less fortunate. And it wasn't until I came to America that I realized that they were only running from their problems. I think that we should never know peace if our neighbors are suffering. But that's just me. But as someone who's been on the other side, as someone who's lived in what's considered the poorest country in the world, and then came to live here in America, I can tell you that we're pretty darn similar. Sure, you don't have rebel groups running around shooting at you in classrooms, but hey, have you realized how many school shootings we've had just this year? I say that to just open your eyes to what's going on right here at home. I know that my story can seem so far away and seem like it could never happen here, but it can, and it can happen to you. And if not to you, to your neighbor. And we need to pay attention. Because if you don't speak up for those who are being oppressed today, and God forbid they're no longer here in a few years, who's going to speak up for you when it's you that's being oppressed? A lot of people expect me to blame Congo or to hate other tribes, but I don't. In fact, I love Congo more than I have ever loved it today. I love everyone in that country as if they were my siblings, as if they were my family. I refuse to let my sister's life and death be used as some sort of propaganda tool to fuel hatred against other people. So instead, I use it to say this. Love is love, water is life. Black lives matter. No one is illegal, and no one belongs on any kind of registry. Thank you.